a level of discontent. So they were different, but the difference, there are sorts of similarities. I think we had 108 youth workers, we went down to 28. They closed all but 4 of the youth centres. That was the week the EMA went down, was cut by £20. When you add that all up together, that's a toxic mixture. Plus you have people out on the streets and they're actually being hit by the police without sufficient number. It's one thing to hit somebody and then you can control them. It's one thing to hit a few thousand people and they explode and then you run back into the police station, put the shutters down, and the only building that's protected is the police station. That's essentially what happened on the day. And the crowd built and said, well, why don't you come out, explain to the family? I think that one of the things that we have to understand is that the cuts and coming on after 10 years of people being in poverty have sparked something else. A lot of young people, I went to the riots that night to talk to the young people there. It's the first riot I've ever been on, and I remember the 81 riots, where people mentioned EMA, where people mentioned things like, one of the attacks on the police were, you're fake, because your chief constable just been signed for taking money. He's got all this money and he's taking it. That was a very strange discussion to have in the middle of a riot, where people are saying, you're fake, don't tell us what to do, look what you're doing with the Murdoch question. So I think all these things have to be taken into account. Where do people learn this stuff from? I mean, some of the establishment has to take some responsibility for what's going on. You can't have MPs taking, so the people that are complaining about it, some of them have obviously paid back the money that they've taken, but they haven't been sent to jail for it. People have been sent to jail for 3 licks of an ice cream, got 18 months. Do you know what I mean? What should you get if you're a banker? I think we have to take it. I would say there were different things in different areas, but there was a running thread. I saw people stealing toilet paper and stealing nappies. Now, of course, they show you the people stealing the flat screen television, but why are people doing this? Surely we have to have a greater explanation than what's been done, that people have just gone mad and bad.
Can I just say two things here? As my friend here has said, 75% of those people who've appeared in front of the courts as a result of being arrested during the riots have previous convictions. And I think it's something like 25% or a reasonable proportion of them have been to prison 10 or more times. So we're not talking about just ordinary members of the public.
Just let me ask you about
and the other thing.
I will let you make the second point, but while you're on that point, so I saw Kenneth Clarke interviewed, I think last night on the BBC, and he said, look, a third of the male population in this country has a previous
that was
conviction.
Worrying, wasn't it?
Well, it was a shock to me. I thought,
across the country.
So my question to you is, has the minister got it wrong? And if he hasn't got it wrong, well, then it's practically inevitable that a proportion of the rioters will have previous convictions, because there's such a high proportion of the general population have.
Yeah, I don't know. That sounds like an extraordinarily high figure to me. But what I would say is, yes, I understand people's anger about the previous commissioner going to a health farm for 3 months or whatever it was, free of charge. I can understand people being angry about politicians fiddling their expenses. Does that justify people to go and break the law? I don't think it does. Yes, but I understand people.
Politicians asking for disproportionate punishment on them, and not the same on bankers and politicians.
Of course not. And there needs to be equality of law. But I still say it does not justify, just because somebody else breaks the law, does not give you reason to go and break the law yourself.
But I think we need to be, we need to be fair in analysing this, and this is, it's very skewed. It's almost, I mean, if I was a cynical man, I'd say, some politicians and some media, they took an opportunity to deflect, attention and interest in what was happening to something new. A lot of people kind of got a breather because of the heat was on something else, and I think they used the right situation for that. And I think that is very, very unfortunate. Wayman's right. Someone got over 6 months for a bottle of water, 40p worth of bottled water. What message are you giving?
I think it's crucial that what has happened, of course, happened, and one doesn't want to see it being repeated. But there has to be some powerful messages that has to come out of it. And the issue about this sentencing and punishment is crucial, Azad.
No. It's crucial if you do the same thing for bankers. If you do the same thing for
entirely agree.
politicians. Why would you punish poor people? Why would you punish poor people more?
I think nobody is even mentioning the word that these people who perhaps are guilty of great offences should be let out so lightly. The fact is that the two wrongs do make a right, and that has to be dealt with. But I think the way Wayman explained the backdrop that we have in terms of recession, in terms of the MPs, in terms of the police chief involved into areas, many other activities that have come in where the greed basically was the key area they were working for. Now suddenly you find this deprived, unemployed, very vulnerable young people who took the opportunity in the right hand. But it is this generation that has to be clearly told that there can never be an excuse, there can never be a justification for such actions. It's wrong, it's wrong. And I think there was a clear unanimity coming on. We do go for a danger by giving any sort of message that perhaps it can be excusable in some form or so. It cannot be, it can never be. The point is we need to look at now the reasoning behind it. That is crucial. That's perhaps the politicians were simply clouding the face.
But Iqbal, sorry, I have to come in.
Let me I'll bring you in.
We need to now look at this whole issue that in terms of sentencing, I think the sentencing have to be firm, very powerful, very strong. Because there has to be this clear message that has to go out. Otherwise, as we rightly saw, the policemen sort of staring at those people, grabbing stuff from the windows and walking by. That is simply inexcusable. That's not possible. But when we had the police presence, after 3 or 4 days, we could see the difference. And that was what was needed in the very first time. And we need to explore why the police behaviour was in this way. And this hasn't come out. The very first day, that's crucial.
Yeah.
Make your point. Yeah.
I think, Iqbal is right to a sense, but, you have to look at it from everyone's perspective, everyone's angle. The young people on the street, they're looking at being preached by someone who's just fiddled a piece of paper and, got money for another house. Yeah, they've just seen how they've taken backhanders from newspapers, news industry, and it's okay. It's fine. They've seen how bankers have destroyed their family, their livelihood, and it's okay. None of this rhetoric from these politicians were coming about these. What was the rhetoric about the bankers? We're not going to let them have bonuses. Are they having bonuses? Yes, they're having bonuses. Are we still paying for them? Yes, we're still paying for them. When do they have to sort their house in order? Another 20 years. Yeah, and here you are, poor, innocent people, young people. Yes, I totally agree. You commit the crime, you do the time, but not disproportionately. Not disproportionately. Someone steals a bottle of water, 40p, you don't put them away for 6 months. And it's not an extreme. This is exactly what happened.
This is, of course,
when the judiciary gets politicized like this by people like our Prime Minister and the commissioners and everyone else, when they get politicized like this, then we're in danger.
It's not just that there are 1 or 2 people that have been put away for extraordinary lengths of time for stealing a bottle of water, but we now have the general statistics, and they were printed in the newspapers a couple of days ago, and right across the board, the sentences are considerably higher, and what's more, a very strong signal was given by politicians to the judiciary that this should happen. So really we've got a kind of politically driven justice system on this issue at this time. Do you think, Brian?
Well, if the judges are sentencing people on the basis of the pressure that is put on them by politicians, that is clearly wrong. What the judges should be doing is what they do in every other case, which is to look at the seriousness of the offence, look at the circumstances of the individual, and to give an appropriate sentence. Now, I think you can argue that an offence committed in a riot is more serious than an offence that is committed in isolation, and therefore a harsher sentence for that reason is justified. But I agree with other members of the panel that people in positions of authority, like MPs who fiddle their expenses, should also that is also a far more serious offence. These are the lawmakers breaking the law, and therefore they deserve harsher sentences, and we have not seen the same severity of sentence against that group of offenders.
We're running out of time now, so briefly.
In fact, one needs to look into the effect of the sentencing, and is it really being effective in the long run? As we mentioned early on, that the 75% of those, many of them have been in prisons for years, and they've come out. They are re-offenders. Now, by simply sentencing them, are we really solving the long-term problem? That's not, but what I think what is missing is the initial problem, the base that we have created in the society. What sort of society we have now created, where these young elements are simply there looking at the wrongs that have been committed and say, well, there's nothing wrong with it. We want to be on the same level as well. So we need to look at the very ethics, the very issues of morality, and the absence of religion, which has been sidelined and been marginalized over the years, which is simply which is needed there to guide our young generation
to those
into
questions.
that. Yes.
Asad, a politically driven justice response?
Yeah, absolutely, it was, and I totally agree that you have to look at the wider elements and things that created the riot in the first place. By far, they were different in different places. But most of the people that were out there, I mean, we had loads of people out there in different places, in Birmingham as well. If you ask those young people why they're out there, number one was because of the police, and number two is because the politicians are hypocrites. This is what they said. So we have to factor that in.
We'll now conclude this section of the discussion, but do join us for the second part, where we'll be investigating some of those issues raised by the panel in this part of the discussion. Welcome back to the big debate on the riots that struck English cities a month ago. And now we've discussed the policing and the causes of the riots and many other aspects of the supposed causes of those events. But in this final section, we're going to be discussing the role of religion and the impact on the Muslim community. And rejoining me to be part of that discussion is Dilwar Hussain Khan of the East London Mosque, Leon Silver from the Central Synagogue in East London, Shaista Gohir, who's Senior Trustee of the Muslim Women's Network, and Martin Samouda, who was a friend of Mark Duggan, the black man who was killed by police in Tottenham and the event which began the riots. Welcome to you all. Let me first ask you about this very fast transition in the press from the Muslim community being demonized as the source of terrorism to being the heroic figures who stood up to the rioters. It's must have been a dizzying moment, Dilwar.
Well, it's nice to see there's something positive about Muslims, although we had to pay a big price. I mean, some people had to lose their life. But I think this is actually the teachings of our religion. We have to stand up for justice, stand up for what is right. Stand up for the oppressed, This is, I think, this is not only in Islam, actually. It's in most of the religions, Christianity, Judaism, Hinduism, all religion teaches these values, I think. And I think this is what is missing now, especially in the West. Most people don't want to be affiliated to a religion. They think it's being backward and it's not going with the trend and all this. So I think religion definitely has a role to play in the Muslim community. I think comparatively we are more religious than any other communities. Our attendance in mosques and our observance of our rituals and the halal, haram. I think Muslims, we observe more than probably any other religious communities. I think this definitely had a role to play in the way we actually behave in this kind of circumstances.